Morning, good morning.
Everything went okay at the Minyan?
Baruch Hashem.
Good. Okay, I think we'll get underway, guys, as we start back on the top of Kaf Tet, Amud Aleph, towards the top. Okay, we got to this reference, a number of examples, basically of the same, I'll call it, theme, that lack of washing, particularly of the hands, would result in, and in touching certain parts of the body, could cause illnesses, problems, things like that. Okay, seems very appropriate under the current medical situations with the pandemic. Okay, so we stopped on, I'm going to start on second line on the Gemara. Of course, in their day, they thought it was an evil spirit that were on the hands. We understand it in more scientific terms today. Okay? So, says the Gemara, Tanya was also taught in the Braita, right? Rabbi Natan Amar, says Rabbi Natan, Bat Chorin Hizo, that this evil spirit is a free agent. It remains on the hands, okay? Mekapedet ad sheyirchotz yadav shlosha pa'amim, and it sticks around there until you wash your hands 3 times. Okay, again, thorough washing, right? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, says puch ma'avir bat melech. Okay, puch here is a kind of eyeshadow. Okay, Antigone, all right? Okay, removes this particular shade, the particular spirit called Bat Melech, uposeket hadim'ah, but at the same time, it stops tears, umarbeh se'ar ba'af ha'payim, and what it does is it promotes the growth of eyelashes. Tanya nami hachi. And the Braita teaches as follows as well. Rabbi Yossi Omer, says Rabbi Yossi, Puch ma'avir bat melech, that this eyeshadow clears away this particular demon on the eyes, et hadima, but it stops tears, umaber se'ar ba'af ha'payim, and it increases the length of one's eyelashes. Amar Ma'ukva, Amar Shmuel, and Ma'ukva says in the name of Shmuel. Now, as we continue, we're going to see that they must have used quite a number of herbs and plants for medicinal purposes, right? So he starts off by saying, Alin ein bahem mishum refuah. Okay, that certain leaves, okay, or certain herbs don't necessarily have medicinal purposes. So the implication, of course, is Shabbat. They needed to grind the leaves, pound the leaves, okay, to get it, and that's not permitted on Shabbat. Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef, kusperarta, coriander, okay, which is a common spice, ein ba mishum refuah. It does not have a medicinal benefit. Okay, Ramah Rav Sheshet, says Rav Sheshet, kshut, hops. Okay, we know what hops are made usually for plant for producing liquids, particularly beer. Ein bahen mishum refuah. They do not have medicinal benefit. Okay. Amar Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef again, kusbarta, coriander, afilu ledidi kasheli. Rav Yosef said, even for me, despite my blindness, Rav Yosef is saying, it's still problematic for me. Amar Rav Sheshet, says Rav Sheshet, gargira, which is arugula, another kind of plant. Okay, afilu ledidi ma'aleh. For me, it is beneficial. Va'amar Mar Ukva Amar Shmuel. It says Mar Ukva in the name of Shmuel. Kol minei kshot. All kinds of hops. Sharu levar matroza. Okay, with the exception of it's a kind of melon, okay, or a kind of cucumber, okay, would be permitted. Amar, with the exception of all kinds of permitted, exception of mat rosa, okay. Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda, Shrika Tavya Shari. Okay, Rav Chisda is saying that the juice from a kind of cucumber or melon, okay, question of whether it's used for medicinal purposes as permitted. Pi'apue bea, but a kind of hash made of mashed eggs is forbidden, asur is forbidden. And now a story. The Batayu de Zeiri, Avdale Lechia Bar Ashi. The wife of Zeiri made this mixture, let's say this hash, for Chia Bar Ashi. Velo Achal, but he did not eat it. Okay? Amra Le, she said to him, the Rabach Avdele Va'achal. For your master, your teacher, I made it and he ate. Va'at lo achal, and you don't eat it. Okay? Zeiri l'ta'ameh. Zeiri went according to his particular view. The Amar Zeiri, as he said, Notina dam yayin slul, umayim slulim, letoch hamishameret b'shabbat. That one may put clear water or clear wine into a strainer or into a sieve on Shabbat, right? Va'eno choshesh, and does not have to be concerned that they might be over on Shabbat. Alma, what this implies, kevan de mishtate hachi, okay, since basically he's going to drink this, lav midei ka'avid, okay, it's not something that is normally done. Hachanami, here too he's thinking, kevan da mitchil hachi, since the hash is usually something that's eaten and not used for medicinal purposes, lav midei ka'avid, okay? It's not something that's appropriate to be done. So if it was to be used for medicine, it would be not be permitted, okay? Va'amar Mar Ukva, and now Mar Ukva says the following: Ki mi shenagfa yado oroglo, one who bruised or wounded his hand or his foot. Okay. Samta bayayin. He can put the hand or the foot and immerse it into wine in order to reduce the swelling. Okay. Ve'eno choshesh, and again does not have to be concerned about transgressing Shabbat. Ibayalahu. So they asked him, chala, vinegar. My, what about immersing it in vinegar? Amar Rav, says Rav Hillel, the Rav Ashi, ki havina be Rav Kahana. When we were students in the academy of Rav Kahana, amre chalalo. They said in regards to vinegar, no, that was not permitted. Amar Rava, says Rava, Bahani b'nei Mechoza, and as far as the, excuse me, people of Mechoza, Kevan de Mefanke, because they are particularly sensitive, Afilu Chamra Nami Masilahu, even wine is such that it cures them. So therefore they would not be permitted to immerse in wine, even on Shabbat. Ravina ikle lebe Rav Ashi. Ravina happened to come to the house of Rav Ashi. Chazye dedarechicha le chamra agabe de kare. And he happened to see that the donkey stepped on the foot of Rav Ashi. V'yativ katsamit le bechala. And he sat and he immersed his leg in vinegar. Amarle, he said to him, Lo savar lamar lahad amar Rav Hillel. Okay. Chalel lo. Doesn't the master hold by that which Rav Hillel said in regards to vinegar, that it's not permitted? Amarle, he said to him, Gabi hayad begav haregel shani. Regarding the hand and regarding the foot, there's a difference. Ikada'am, right? And there are those who say the story, Chazia de katsamit le bechamra. And there are those who say that he immersed his foot in wine. Amarle, and he said to him, Lo savar lamar lahad amar Rava. Doesn't the master hold according to that view of Rava? Okay. Hani b'nei mechoza kevan de mefanke afilu chamra nami maselahu. That those people of mechoza who are particularly sensitive, even wine is such that it cures them, okay, therefore being forbidden. Umar nami hamafanek, and the master also is sensitive. Amarle, he said to him, Gav hayad v'gav haregel shani. The back of the hand and the back of the foot are different. The Amar Rav Ada bar Matana, says Rav Ada bar Matana Amar Rav in the name of Rav, Gav hayad v'gav haregel, harei hein kimakeh shel chalal, that a serious wound on the back of the hand or on the back of the foot could lead to something fatal. Umechalalin alehen et Shabbat. And it's permitted therefore to transgress the Shabbat if it's going to cause fatal or particularly internal injuries. Tanu Rabbanu, a new Braita. Harochtzin b'mei grar. We're now still talking about Shabbat, okay? And he's saying it is permissible to bathe in the warm waters, the hot springs of Grar, b'mei chamatan, and in the hot springs, the waters of Chama, b'mei Asya, okay, and in the waters of Asya, b'mei Tveria, and in the hot springs of Tiberias. We know all of these. Chama is not far actually from Tiberias, right? Avalo biyam hagadol, he says, but not in the Great Sea. In other words, not in the Mediterranean. Velo b'mei mishra, and not in what we'll call steeping waters. That's waters in which they would put flax in, okay? Velo biyama shel Sodom, and not in the Sea of Sodom, the Dead Sea. We're minhu, but we're going to challenge this with another Braita that says, Rochatzim b'mei Tveria ubiyam hagadol, that it is permitted to bathe in the hot springs of Tiberias and in the Mediterranean. Aval lo b'mei mishra, but not in steeping flax water, v'lo b'yama shel Sodom, and not in the Dead Sea. Gemara tells us between these two braitas, kasha yam hagadol, hayam hagadol. There seems to be a problem regarding the Mediterranean. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan lo kasha. No, there is no problem. Ha Rabbi Meir. One is the view of Rabbi Meir. Ha Rabbi Yehuda. The other is the view of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tnan, as taught elsewhere in a Mishnah, Kol Hayamim Kemikvah. All of the seas are like a mikvah, Shneamar, as based on a pasuk, ulemikveh hayamayim karayamim, and to the gathering the water, he called the seas from Bereshis. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the view and the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, Yam Hagadol kamikvah, that the Mediterranean is like a mikvah, a gathering of waters. V'lo ne'amar yamim, but it doesn't say all of the seas. Ela sheyesh bo minei yamim harbei, because there are different varieties of seas. Okay, or in other words, the Mediterranean has different sources of water coming into it. So like a mikvah, it has different sources. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol Hayamim Mitaharim Bezochalim. According to Rabbi Yossi, all of the seas can purify when they are flowing. Upsulin lezavim, uvelomitzoraim. But they are not acceptable, okay, for somebody, for the purpose of purification, for somebody who is a zav or somebody who's a mitzora. Ulakadesh bahen mechatat, or to use that water in order to make the water of purification for the para aduma. Mat kifla Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak challenged this, right? And he says as follows as we go on to Amud Beis, right? Amor, the plige le'inyan tuma v'tahara. I would say that they differ in respect to issues of cleanliness and uncleanliness, purity or impurity, right? Now, what happens? Le'inyan Shabbat, mishamat laho. But in regarding the issue of Shabbat, okay, do we know for sure? Have we learned where what their positions are? Ela Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, says Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, lo kasha. It's not a problem here. Ha de ishtahe. In the one case, that's the question if the person remains in the water a length of time, then they're delaying because they're there for medicinal purposes. Ha delo tehishtai. There they're not delaying, which seems simply that they're jumping in the water to cool off. B'maya okimta abrataita. And on what basis then do we establish this this brayta? Delo ishtai, in a situation where the person did not tarry, they didn't remain long in the water. Idelo ishtai, if they don't remain, afilu b'mei mishra nami. If that's the case, then even regarding the flax water, right, it should be all right. Dahatanya, because it isn't a tot in a brayta. Lo chatzin b'mei teveria, u'b'mei misra, u'b'yama shel Sodom, that it's permitted to bathe in the waters of Tiberias and in flax water, steeping water, u'b'yama shel Sodom, and in the Dead Sea, v'afal pi sheyesh lo chatatim b'rosho, even though he may have wounds or scabs on his head. B'med varim amurim, what are we talking about here? Shelo nishtayeh, that he's not remaining there for a long time. Aval nishtayeh, but if he's remaining there for some time, again, as a sign of using it for medicinal purposes, asur, then it's prohibited. Ela yam hagadol, ayam hagadol lo kasha. But here, when we're talking about, says Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, the Mediterranean, that's not an issue. Ha biyafin shabo. Here, on the one hand, we're talking about those locations where it's pure water. Ha biraim shabo. Here, elsewhere, we're talking about those locations where the water is polluted, where it's murky, where it's dirty. Okay. All right. Let's go on. Mei Mishra. Okay. Amei Mishra. Nami Lokasha. If we're talking about the flax water, the steeping water in one case and the steeping water in the other case, also it's not problematic. Why? Okay. Ha de ishtai, ha de lo ishtai. Here on the one hand, again, he remains long time. Here on the other hand, he doesn't remain a long time. Okay. All right. So we now get to a new Mishnah. Again, this new Mishnah, once more, is going to deal with medicinal issues. And remember, we said, suggested, really, that part of the concern is that they used leaves, plants, herbs that needed to be pounded, grinded, if you will, mortar and pestle kind of thing, which was prohibited on the Shabbat and therefore carried over to the prohibition of use of items for medicines on Shabbat. Okay? Now, sometimes those were grounded and put on like a salve. Sometimes they were eaten. Okay? So our new Mishnah is going to give us a whole long sugya on medicinal aspects. Okay? And sometimes it's a number of different suggestions for the same ailment, depending upon if you have that herbs or you have those items available. Okay? Or various different sages are going to give different suggestions. We'll start with our Mishnah. Ein ochlin izavion b'Shabbat. One does not eat isop, okay, right, on Shabbat. Lafi she'eino ma'achal bri'im, because it's not a common food eaten by healthy people. In other words, it was only eaten for medicinal purposes. Aval ochelhu et yo'ezer, but it is permitted to eat yo'ezer, okay, right? V'shoteh avu bara'oah, and to drink avu bara'oah. Okay. Now, what are these specific items? Okay. Yo'ezer is a variety of Greek hyssop, as opposed to hyssop that grew in Eretz Yisrael. And avu bara'oah is again a kind of plant that a shepherd's plant that has a liquid that can be made from it. Okay? And what is the Mishnah telling us? Kol ha'ochlin ochel adam l'refuah, v'chol hamashkim shoteh. Sorry, anyone who eats normal food, any normal person who eats a food, okay, then somebody who needs it for medicinal purposes can eat it as well. And anyone who drinks a normal drink, then a person can drink it, a sick person can drink it as well. Chutz mimei dekalim, with the exception of water from palm trees. The kos ikarim, mipnei shehen liroka, okay, or particular kind of medicine made from the roots of trees because they are cures for jaundice. Aval shotehu made the kalim l'tzam'o, but he may drink water from liquid from palm trees simply to quench his thirst. v'sach shemen ikarin shelo l'refu'ah, and he may anoint his body with oil that's made from roots, okay, so long as it's not done for the medicinal purposes. Now, Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef tells us, Ezov, hyssop, avarta, barhamne. That is the kind of hyssop that grows on a bush. Izvion, okay, avarta, barhinig. That's the kind of hyssop that grows on a shrub. Different varieties. Okay? Ula Amar, says Ula, Marva Chiyava, white sage, right? That's what he considers it. Ula Ikle Lebe Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Ula happened to come to the house, right, of Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Aitu Lakame Marva Chivra, and they brought before him white sage. Amar, in his response, Hainu Ezov Diktiv Ba'oraita. This is the kind of hyssop that was written about or described in the Torah. Rav Papi Amar, says Rav Papi, Shumshuk. Shumshuk is again a kind of plant, marjoram. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Medifti, and he suggests, Kivate de Rav Papi Mistabra. It seems to me, he says, that the opinion of Rav Papi seems logical. The Tnan, because it's taught in the Mishnah, Mitzvat Ezov Shlosha Kilachim. Okay, the mitzvah of using the Ezov, the hyssop, is basically 3 stalks. Ubahen Shlosha Gavolim. And each of them have 3 husks or 3 leaves. The shumshuk hu de mishtakacha. And shumshuk, this margarine, seems to be what we find, hachi, what we find here. Lamai achlele, for what purpose do they eat it? Lekuk ene, okay, right? Bama'ai, for intestinal worms. Achlele b'sheva tamre uchmata, okay, one eats it with 7 black dates. Mimai havya, okay, from where does it derive? Okay, in other words, where do you get this illness of having intestinal worms? Mikimcha de sare bemana, okay, from flour that has remained in a utensil. The chalif alei arba'in yamin, that has remained around, in other words, for 40 days. A new piece from our Mishnah. Aval ochelhu et yoezer, that permits one to eat this kind of hyssop. My yoezer, what is this yoezer? Putnak, it is pennyroyal. Again, another kind of plant that's used for medicine. Lamai achlele, for what purpose does one eat it? La arkata b'me'ai, for another kind of worms in the intestines, in the liver. Okay, achle la b'sheva tamrei chivarta, one eats it with 7, okay, white figs. Mimai havya, on what basis does one get this particular ailment? Ma'umtsa, okay, from raw meat. Umaya aliba rekana, and having drunk water on an empty stomach, right, after the raw meat. Umibisra shamna, or from very fatty meat, aliba rekana, and then drinking on an empty stomach. Umibisra de Torah, or from ox meat, aliba rekana, and drinking again on an empty stomach. Okay. Amgoza. Okay. And from nuts, or liba rekana, and on an empty stomach, drinking. Or megire deruvia, okay, and also, okay, from again another kind of plant, okay, fenugreek, right, aliba rekana, and drinking on an empty stomach, okay, umashte maya abatre, and drinking water after these. Okay, hold on a second, fellas. Sorry about that. Okay, right. Again, umashte maya abatre, and drinking water after. Okay, so what happens? Ve'ilo levle tachle chivarta. Okay, and if you don't swallow it, okay, then you become sick, all right, in your bones, right? Right, ve'ilo, and if not, late. Okay, and if this doesn't work, okay, in other words, if this remedy doesn't work, it says the following: Livle tachle chivarta, drink white, swallow white cress, right, which is a plant. Velo, and if this remedy doesn't work, leti beta'anita, okay, one should then fast. Velite bisra shamna, okay, and then take fatty meat, okay, vilish de agumre, and put it into hot coals, okay, vilimitz garma, okay, and then suck on a piece of the bone of that meat, viligma chala, and then swallow, drink some vinegar, Ve'ika da amri, and there are others say, chala lo, mishum de kashe lekavda. Others say, no, don't use the vinegar because it is difficult for one's liver. Ve'ilo, and if that remedy is not beneficial or you don't have it, laite gurda da asinta, okay, that one has to bring the scrapings, the cuttings, okay, of, again, some plant, right? Once again, the grida me'ilai letatai, okay? That's a kind of thorn bush, and you scrape it from top down, velo mitatai le'ilai, and not from bottom up, right? Dilma nafka haide pume, lest the worms are going to come out of your mouth. Okay. Velish vaka bashikra. Okay. And then what one has to do is bow, bend over. Okay. And drink wine. Be shavave. Okay. At that point. Right? And from the trunk of the tree, right? Ulamacha naskarinun. Okay, and then, okay, the next day, one closes their nostrils, lenekavin dide his nostrils, vilishte, and drink it all. V'chim mepaneh, and when he defecates, Mefane apashicha dedikla. Okay, then he has to defecate on the branches of the trunk, the bark of a palm tree. Okay? Now, another case from our Mishnah. Vishotin abu bra'oeh. Okay, drinking this adam. Mai abu ba'ai, what is this? Chum tara. Okay, it is chum tara. Mai chum taria, what is chum taria? Chutra yichida. Okay, it again is a drink, okay, that is composed of stripped parts of the bark. Okay, lamai avdela. How is it? What is it for? What's the purpose of it? Legiluya. Right? Legiluya is water. If somebody drank water that was uncovered, exposed water, and the fear is that a snake could have drunk the water and put its venom in that water. So this is a concern. Okay? Ve'ilo, and if that's not available, laite kamsha klile, one should bring 5 roses, the chamsha kusta teshikra, and also bring 5 cups of beer. Vanish kalunehu, mix them, cook them up together. Bahadi hadade, adekaima anafka, until one has a measure, okay? Okay, finishte, and drink it. Ime to Rav Achad Bai Ba'ama, and the mother of Rav Achad Bai Ama, okay, Avdale Lahahu Gava, made this mixture for a certain person, okay, Chad Kalila V'Chad Kusta Deshikra, with 1 rose and with 1 cup of beer, Shalka V'ish Kite, she boiled it up, okay, and she made him drink it. Vishigra Tanura Bagarfatai, okay, and she then put into the oven a brick, Va'otvite Levinta Begova, and she made him sit on the hot brick, V'nafak Kiyahotse Yarka, and what came out of his mouth was like a green leaf. In other words, he vomited out whatever potential poison he could have drunk. Rav Avia Amar, says Rav Avia, Revi'ata, the chalva me'iza chivarta. He says, take 1/4 of a cup of milk from a white goat. Rav Huna Bar Yehuda Amar says, Laite et roga chalita. He says, bring, okay, a sweet etrog, ulechaike, and carve it out, ulemalaye duvsha, and fill it with honey, velotva be malele denura, and then put it in the coals of the oven, of the fire, velichle, and then eat it. Rav Chanina Amar, says Rav Chanina, me raglayim b'nei arba'in yom. It says urine that perhaps from a child, okay, that has played around, had been for 40 days. Okay. Barzina, the zibura. Okay. What happens? You need a barzina, a small cup, to use for a wasp sting. Revi'ah le'ikrava. You need 1/4 of a cup for the bite of a scorpion. Palga revi'ah legiluya. A 1/2 of a 1/4 a cup for somebody who drank um, drank unexposed water. Riva afilu l'kshafim ma'alu, and even a quarter of a cup, okay, is good to deal with magic, with the curses, with those kinds of things, is beneficial in that situation. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, okay, the following. Ha nigron, okay, va'av nagar, v'tiraika, okay, this is a kind of spinach and a kind of beet water, and also another kind of plant, okay, right, okay. Ma'alu bein legaluya, bein lekshafim, is beneficial whether it's for somebody who drank exposed water or for magic. And now a story. Haiman de Bala Chivaya. There was a certain person who swallowed, the word is a snake, but I think more like a worm or something. Luchle kshuta b'milcha. Okay, and they had him eat hops that are salted. Okay, ulerehite, and to run tlata mile, and run 3 miles. Okay? Maybe the fact is that after the running and the drinking, he would vomit it up. Rav Shimi bar Ashi, Chaz Yelahahu Gavra. Rav Shimi bar Ashi says, I saw a certain person, the Balach Hivya, okay? He swallowed a snake or a worm, Idme le kiparsha, and he appeared to me like a horseman. Kochle kshuta b'milcha, okay? They had him eat, again, salted hops, v'harhite kame tlata mile, and run 3 miles, right? V'nafik mine gube gube, and it came out of him piece by piece. Okay? Ikeda Amre, and there are those who say, Rav Shimi bar Ashi bala chavya, that it was Rav Shimi himself who swallowed the worm or the snake. Ata Eliyahu idmele kiparsha, and it was Elijah who appeared to him as if he were a horseman. Ochle kshuta b'milcha, he ate salted hops. Bahar ite kame tlata mile, and they made him run 3 miles, right? Okay. In other words, this kind of mixture of herb water, right? V'nafak mine gube gube, and it came out of him piece by piece. Now, another statement. Hai man de tarke chivar. There was a certain person who was bitten by a snake. Laite uvra de chamra. And here they suggest to bring the embryo of a chivarta, de chamra chivar, of a white donkey, velikar tear it open, velot ve'elai, and place it upon the wound. V'hani mili de lo ishtakach trefa. And this is so long as the mother of that animal was not considered to be a trefa. Okay, I'm just going to go over the top a little bit. Okay, Hahu bar Kasha, and there was a certain officer, the Pampadita, a Jewish officer from Pampadita, the Karke Chivaya, who was bitten by a snake. Right? Havetlesar Chamre Chivarta for Pampadita, and there were 13 white donkeys in Pampadita, right? Karinhu, the kuhu, they tore them open, V'ishtakachachu trefa, and they were all found to be trefa, have, okay, right? Chada Bahahu Gisa, to Pompadita. There was another on the other side of Pompadita, Ad Azle Maite La Achle Aye. Until they were able to go get it and bring it, the lion had devoured it. Okay, and that's where we're going to stop right there. Okay, as we're going to continue then with further medicinal issues tomorrow on Kaf Yud Amud Aleph. Right? Okay, guys.
Rabbi, thank you.
All
Thank you
right.
very much,
Take
Rabbi
care.
Green. Have a wonderful day.
Okay,
Be
take
well.
care, everybody. Be well.
Chodesh Tov, everyone. Chodesh Tov.